Oh, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we're going to talk about wolves, alphas, the president, and the mystery of American masculinity. We're going to do this because a pundit by the name of Gorka said that the reason the president wasn't liked is because he was an alpha. The president is not an alpha. President doesn't even know what an alpha is. Neither does Gorka. Most people who use the term in the sense of describing a tough guy don't know what an alpha is. The idea, the myth that exists in popular culture about an alpha, that came from a study of wolves. It was popularized in the United States in the 1960s by a guy named Meck, who relied heavily on research from an older researcher, a German guy, I can't remember his name. The problem is, all of that research was done on wolves in captivity, in zoos. So the image of an alpha that most people have is what occurs when an animal is confined, scared, thrown into a habitat with strangers, unsure that they're going to have enough to eat, putting up a front because they're terrified. That's what many alphas of today are striving for, to emulate the behavior that comes from being terrified. Meck went on to study wolves in the wild. He felt so bad about how he cast wolves in that first book, he asked the publisher to stop printing it. And it was selling incredibly well. Asked him to stop printing it. Spent 10 years of his life trying to correct the misinformation that he unintentionally helped spread. A wolf in the wild, an alpha in the wild, a free alpha, is an entirely different animal. You think about the myth, you know, this commanding, dominating, aggressive, violent, takes whatever he wants, concerned about himself. That's the myth. That's not reality. That myth has been debunked for decades, but it endures. Why? Why does that endure? For the same reason Trump's popularity endures among some groups. It gives them a reason to be their worst. It gives them a justification to act in the most self-serving and immoral, unethical ways. Well, that's how wolves act in the wild. It's just nature. No, it's actually not. The president said it's okay, so it's okay. No, that's not what it means. An alpha in the wild, yeah, they're a leader, but they're not commanding. They lead by example. Yeah, they are aggressive, they are assertive, but they're not violent for no reason. A lot of the snarling you see around mealtime, that's the alpha telling some of the wolves, you know, well, don't eat it all, there's other members of the pack. The alpha's definitely not self-serving. His entire mission, his entire purpose for being is to care for his pack, to care for his community. I think American masculinity would be better served trying to be a free alpha rather than a terrified animal in a cage. Lashing out, because it doesn't know what to do, because it's been forced into a role. The other thing is that the alpha in the wild is a thinking animal. When you really sit down and you think about this, it really does make more sense. It's the myth, it's the image. The whole idea of the alpha male in the American masculine sense, it's a front. It's an image. It's something that people are trying to play into because that's what they've been conditioned to think is right. But many of them are willfully conditioned. They know deep down that this is not right. They probably know that it's not even true in nature. They just reject reality because they want a justification to not improve, to not become better men. You know, I was part of that group that for a long time thought that a lot of men just didn't get it. You know, if I point at a jug of milk and I say that's spoiled milk, does that mean that all milk is spoiled? Same thing applies to the phrase toxic masculinity. The same thing applies. Just because certain behaviors are toxic does not mean that all masculinity is bad. I would also point out that the origin of that term did not come from feminists or leftists. It came from the first men's rights activists, the mythopoetics. Their concern, and they were right, was that the hypermasculine was the term they used. The aggressiveness, the violence, had been turned up so much that men were losing touch with the deep masculine, is what they called it. The nurturing, the developing, the thinking aspects of it. That they had just lost their way. And that they were motivated out of fear. And they were right. When you look at the real alphas, the free alphas, those that aren't confined, their entire purpose in life is being nurturing. It's protecting and allowing their community to prosper. It's what they do. They don't try to subjugate because they're not afraid of the competition, because they don't focus on competition, they focus on cooperation. It would be great if a lot of the people who considered themselves alphas actually were, in the real sense, the wild sense, the free sense, not the captive sense. And sure, you can continue to go along the road of pop culture and the myth, that's fine. But understand it's coming from a place of fear. You're there kicking down on those that you believe to be weaker, more vulnerable. But understand, you can only do that because of the system we exist in right now. And if that zookeeper ever stops throwing you his scraps, I would rather be around an alpha who had to endure. An alpha who was free, an alpha who had to think. A real one. Rather than a terrified, caged animal, unsure of himself. No. President Trump is not an alpha. The idea that a man who accepts responsibility for nothing, who can't lead, who throws temper tantrums, who is so secure in himself, he has a comb over and a spray tan, who was handed every advantage in life and still manages to whine and cry about how he was treated very badly, and it was very unfair. If that's the definition of an American alpha, if that's the pinnacle of American masculinity, we're probably in real trouble. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good night.